start us off with like a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Superior Court Judge.
Yeah. So my name is Mary Anderson, and I chose to run because I really want to bring a fresh new perspective to the judiciary. I really believe that the court should be reflective of its community, and right
Mhm.
now it is not. So when I decided to run for this position, I really honestly thought about it, reflected, spoke to my husband, my daughter, my family to see if this is really something I wanted to do, because this is a big step. I own and operate my own firm, and I am a successful trial attorney, but I thought to myself, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And so I leaped and I applied to the National Judicial College, where I was accepted to figure out what would it be like to become a full-time judge, because I'm a pro tem judge right now, which
Mhm.
is basically a substitute judge. When a judge is sick, they call me up, or if they go on
Mhm.
vacation. Then thereafter, I applied and got appointed to 4 district courts, and I said to myself, you know what? I can do this. This is something
Yeah.
I can do. This is something I enjoy doing. I love educating the community, and I really want to bring transparency, integrity, and fairness for all. So that's why I decided to run to be your next Snohomish County Superior Court judge.
I love that. That's awesome. What So I don't know much about the process. I was actually reading the Meet Mary on your website a little bit ago, and you start off with, I knew from the time I was a little girl that I wanted to become a lawyer. And that caught me in the feels because I too, as a little girl, wanted to be a lawyer. I ended up taking the LSATs and everything, and then decided to become a social worker instead. So I can relate on that piece of things. And I totally just sidetracked myself because I was going to say something else about. Oh, yes. So even though I wanted to become a lawyer as a little girl, I don't know much about the process from lawyer to judge. And I think that's probably a common question amongst community members too. So can you help us understand what that looks like, and what's kind of the difference?
I love that question, and thank you for that question, because it's really important that a lot of the community knows that I, as a trial attorney, we educate the judges. And a lot of people don't
Mm.
know that. And I say that because it is our cases that we actually pick out the different issues, and we actually brief out the law. And so we do our legal analysis with these legal briefs that we give to the judge. So the
Mm.
judge basically has 2 separate briefs from plaintiff and defendant. And from there, the judge will determine whether or not to grant or deny each person's motion. And so when you leap from a judicial position from a trial lawyer position, it's not a huge leap, because we're already training, or
Mm.
not training the judges, but we're already educating the judges. So we just go to judicial college to understand a role of a judge, the expectation
Oh.
of a judge, the procedure in a courtroom for the judge. But for me, I'm a trial attorney, so I live inside the courtroom. So I
Mm.
the different processes of what it entails to be a judge as a trial attorney. I speak to jurors on a regular basis, and I understand the rules of evidence, which is really important. So the trajectory from a trial attorney to a judge is not that huge per se, because
Mhm.
it's not like you're being an impartial as a trial attorney, because you're really an advocate for your client. But once you become a judge, you have to be completely neutral. I'm hoping I'm making sense here.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense. And I think oftentimes we imagine the role of a judge or an attorney from the shows that we watch on TV, and things like that. And in those positions, in those shows rather, it's big and dramatic and, all of these things. And it seems like everyone's sort of against each other, and that there's so much difference in the roles. So it's interesting to hear too that, as a trial attorney, it's probably a lot different than a different kind of an attorney as well.
You're absolutely right. So initially I was a transactional attorney. So a transactional attorney is basically just writing up purchase and sales agreement, communicating to the opposing side on a transactional basis, which is
Mm,
more of a desk work type job per se.
right.
Whereas a trial attorney, you're in the courtroom speaking with the judge and the jury. And I also have experience as an appellate attorney. So not only have I been a transactional attorney, a trial attorney, but also an appellate attorney. And
Hmm.
most attorneys choose a specialization to either be transactional, trial, or an appellate, but I have all three.
Okay. And what is an appellate attorney for those that might
Yeah.
not know?
An appellate attorney is when I'm trying to explain this correctly. An appellate attorney is when you are not so happy on what transpired at the trial court level,
Hmm.
and you believe that the trial court judge didn't get it right on
Okay.
either the law and maybe they didn't apply the facts correctly.
Okay.
And so as an appellate attorney, you find the different error of law or error of fact that that trial judge purportedly committed, and
Hmm.
then you brief the issue to the Court of Appeals or the appellate court, the Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court or the U.S. Court of Appeals. So
Okay.
it's really when a trial judge in the trial attorney's point of view and their client got it wrong.
Okay. So, and that's kind of one of the beauties of our system is that it's set up such that it's not, it's not just one final answer. There's not one person that has final say over something, that if you disagree, you can take it to someone else or kind of take it up a notch to say, based on these facts, it appears as though, justice was not served in this situation.
Yeah, that's one beautiful thing about our court systems. You're absolutely right, because we have a municipal court, we have a district court, we have a superior court, we have a court of appeals, and then we also have a Supreme Court on the state side of things. On the
Hmm.
federal side of things, we have the federal trial courts, then the U.S. Court of Appeals, and then the U.S. Supreme Court. So if in fact you're unhappy with the results, you certainly can appeal it up to all those different layers.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of options.
Yeah, the terrible thing about it is if the trial court gets it wrong, it costs your client time, energy, and money. And
Hmm.
so it's delay in justice, but if they get it right, it still costs your client time, energy, and money as well. So
Right.
you do have options though.
Right. Yeah. That's great. And so what have you been a prosecutor or like a defense attorney?
So yes, before I graduated from law school, I was a Real 9 trial attorney for the city of Seattle. So
Okay.
I prosecuted misdemeanors, DUIs, harassment, theft, and those types of cases. I
Okay.
have never been a full-time defense attorney per se, although I have filled in for my defense attorney friends when I graduated from law school in representing clients on simple matters,
Okay.
but not really long-term.
Okay. It sounds though like potentially, the different roles that you've had, you in a way defend, your client or do those similar roles um with a different title.
You are absolutely right. As a civil trial attorney, I actually prosecute like the banks, the
Mhm.
insurance companies, upholding my client's right. So in essence, you're somewhat correct. You're
Mhm.
really defending their constitutional rights to something or
Right.
their rights to something. So yes,
Yes. Okay. And I think my husband and I actually had this conversation recently about the role of a defense attorney versus a prosecutor, or all these different kinds of attorneys that you can be. And he was like, I had no idea it was that complex. And when you think defense attorney, you think like a really bad guy, and this attorney's trying to get him off scot-free, but really it's different than that in a lot of ways, and I think all those different experiences are important to have for sure when you're looking at a position like Superior Court.
I totally agree. But not only do I have the legal experience, Kaitlyn, but I also have a breadth of business experience, real live lived experience here in the
Mhm.
construction industry, in the finance industry, in the real estate industry, and now in the law industry. So I'm really well rounded for this
Mhm.
position, especially because 2/3 of the cases in Snohomish County Superior Court are more likely than not civil matters.
Mhm. So when I think of like your background and your expertise, I like if I put myself in your shoes, I would probably get distracted by my past knowledge or my expertise in like construction or something. Say you were a Superior Court judge and you had a case in front of you that was related to a construction, issue or whatnot. And your role, right, was to be, non-biased and to see the whole facts. How do you how is it helpful for you personally to have that background? And how do you sort of like manage I guess that major difference in role?
Yeah. So I look at it as it's a gift and a benefit. And the
Mhm.
reason why is because when you have individuals that come before you, they can't really hide the ball because I
Mm.
have been in the trenches. So I understand what it looks like on the finance side of things on a rate lock sheet, or how to underwrite a mortgage, or what's the expectation on approval of a loan. So it's a benefit because I understand the inner workings of a
Mhm.
construction company. I understand the inner workings of a mortgage brokerage firm, the inner workings of real estate. So it's really beneficial, not a detriment, when I
Mhm.
have all this knowledge. And for
Yeah.
me, I'm always just a straight shooter. I call
Right.
balls balls and strikes strikes.
Mhm.
And it's natural for me to be completely neutral and
Mhm.
impartial. That's why I made a conscious decision to ensure, and I'm showing the Snohomish County voters that I am the best person for this position. And that's why I went and interviewed with both the Democratic Party and the
Mhm.
Republican Party and got
Mm.
both of those endorsements because truly I am neutral.
Yeah, and what an important thing that neutrality, because yeah, you want to be able to trust, right, that you're going before someone who even if you feel like we might have a different view on something, that you're going to hear the facts as facts and not as, something else.
And it's really important for a judge to not allow my personal feelings or my personal beliefs to infect someone's constitutional rights to a
Mhm.
fair hearing, period.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to demonstrate that to the voters of Snohomish County. And that's why I made a real conscious decision that says, hey, you know what, Mary, you need to let folks know that you're not going to
Mhm.
lean one way or the other. You're going to be 100% neutral and treat everyone fairly, impartially
Mhm.
when they come in front of you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so important. I love that. What would you say kind of led you to making the switch to become a lawyer? Like you had all this other business experience, and I'm so curious about kind of what led you here.
So I had always, as you read it in my little Bible, always wanted to be an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
but things happened in my life that put me on another path. So I just want to also share with you that I didn't have any mentors. So
Mm-hmm.
I am self-taught in everything. I'm self-taught in construction firm business, self-taught in mortgages, self-taught in real estate, and self-taught in law. When I say self-taught in law, of course I went to law school, but they
Right.
don't teach you how to practice law. So to answer your question, the reason why I decided to go to law school in 2008 is because of the big financial crash happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that crash happened, I thought to myself, okay, now the universe is telling me, Mary, go to law school. And so
Right.
that's why I went to law school. And I mean, really, when I master something, I always want to do more. If I
Mm-hmm.
could, honestly, Kaitlyn, I would probably be a full-time student because I love learning.
I
I love learning.
It's really bad. We joke about this in my household as well. And I think my husband's the joking one. I'm the serious one. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do next? Maybe I can
Yes.
go to law school next. What if I get another master's? And he's like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, all those student loans.
I would love to go back and get a PhD. I
Yes.
really would.
Yes. I talk about getting an MBA next or law school, but
Do it.
we'll
I
see.
would encourage it.
Yeah, I think the constant willingness and excitement behind learning, I think, is also something that we don't think about often when we're considering who to vote for in an election, and how important it is to be a lifelong learner. And like, actually, though, putting in that effort to do those things, to learn from people of varying thought processes and values, and all of that, for sure, is important.
I totally agree because I never want to be complacent in anything that I do. And I always want to be learning from others. I don't know everything. I want to learn from other people's walks of life, how they got where they got, what their
Mhm.
values are, how they view life. It's really important because it actually helps me understand people better.
Right.
And so I never want to be complacent. I always want to do better, especially when
Mhm.
I know better.
Right. Right. Have you ever had a client or a case where you learned something from them that really impacted the way that you do your work, whether it's in your current position or past business?
Yeah, I always learn from all of my clients
Hmm.
because all of my clients are different. And the cases that I accept are impact cases to
Hmm.
help everyone. So when I'm picking a case, I'm not choosing a case just because it comes through my door. I turn
Hmm.
down a lot of business. I want to make sure that I'm helping a lot of people if I'm going to use my time, energy, and effort
Hmm.
to take this case up. Because it's kind of
Right.
like my state Supreme Court case. I petitioned for direct review, right? Well, I think
Hmm.
I was 2 years out of law school.
Wow.
And a lot of my colleagues that had been practicing law for like 20, 30, 40 years, they said, Mary, the Supremes are probably not going to accept this case. I said, well, why not? Well, they're not going to accept a case like this. I mean, it has to do with real property. I said, well, this is a really substantial public interest, and I think the Supreme should accept it. So I'm going to write a brief.
Right.
And so what I did is I wrote a brief and I skipped the Court of Appeals altogether. And that's not typical, just so you know.
Hmm.
Usually it's at the trial court level, then you actually go to the Court of Appeals. And then if you lose at the Court of Appeals, you go to the state Supreme Court. I
Hmm.
believed it was so important, this issue, that I skipped the Court of Appeals altogether and the Supremes accepted it. Not only did they
Hmm.
accept it, I argued it as a recent graduate of law school.
Hmm.
I think I was at a law school at that time for 3 years, and we won a 9-0 opinion.
Wow.
So it's really about someone having the courage and a different perspective
Right.
and not the same old, same old. And
Right.
so even though my colleagues of 20, 30, 15 years didn't believe that the Supremes would accept it, guess what? They accepted it and I won.
Right. And that's such a big deal, I think. We can so easily get into these patterns in every career and in our lives too, where we're like, well, nah, that's not what that means, or that's not going to happen, or let's just keep doing it the way that we've been doing it. It's been working. But when we get into those patterns, we miss something. We don't see the whole picture. And sometimes you just got to shoot your shot and and then go for it. So,
I totally agree. You can't be stuck in one path. You have to broaden your view and your scope of the issue in order to make sure that you're making the right decision. And I
mhm,
agree with you 100%. You have to take your shot, especially when you know it's the right thing to do.
right. Yes, and that's another reason why I've really loved doing these interviews with all the candidates, is because sort of what everyone's sort of saying is what they truly believe is the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned before, is that we're not voting for a set of ideals, or we're voting for someone who we are going to put our trust in, that when they're faced with a decision, they're going to follow their gut, their own background, education, whatever, to make a decision that they believe is the best one and to do the most good. And so we have a duty to get to know you, right? To be like, who is this lady and what is she about? How can we know her to know that we trust that when she goes to make the best decision to her, that it's the decision that we would agree with. So it's so nice getting to hear all of this. I love it so much.
I totally agree with you. And always remember, judges serve the people, period. Just because I wear a robe doesn't make me better than anyone else. We as judges have a duty and an obligation to educate the community. We serve you. Right.
That's so important to remember, for sure. Yeah. And many people don't experience judges either, for maybe they have a handful of times in their entire life. So it's often that we don't think about all of these intricacies. So, yeah. So what are some like creative ways? I think I might have asked you a similar question in the forum, but I'm always curious about, obviously your role is to, really know the law. But what are ways that you get to be creative? I think of your background as an entrepreneur, and I'm like, she's got to be a very creative person, and have those creative juices. So how do you get to do that as a judge or as a lawyer?
It just really depends on the different type of cases that come before you, especially if you're dealing with children. I think as a judge, you need to be a little bit more creative than most, because like I had indicated, the question that you asked me earlier, which was a great question, children, their minds are not always developed, and they don't know necessarily the full consequences of their actions.
Right.
And so if an individual, a child comes to me and they're getting in trouble, I think we as a judiciary need to educate them. How do we do that? Have them go do a book report for us on what they did, why it was wrong, and what they're going to do moving forward to correct this deviance of what they have done, instead of perhaps, sending them to prison.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just really all about education, education, and being compassionate on some things, but also holding folks accountable for their actions. There's a balance.
Yeah, there is such a balance. And as a social worker, I talk so much about having boundaries with people and things and stuff like that. And oftentimes our reaction is like, oh, the boundary feels so sticky. Oh, I feel rude. I feel mean. But having a boundary or having fair consequences for violation of boundaries or rules or laws is actually like the ultimate form of compassion and love, because you're saying, hey, I can't be around you, or you can't be doing these things if that's going to be the way that it is. To feel safe and feel comfortable and to have a really respectful relationship, this has to happen. So therefore, there's a consequence, and it creates healthy environments and healthy relationships. So
yeah, I akin that to my child, and that's called tough love.
Right.
And you're doing it because you love them so much and you want to make sure that they are successful when they get older.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So tell me a little bit about pro tem. Like, what is that? I think of it as a substitute teacher. You just gotta like go and do all different kinds of things. But what is it like? How do you like it?
I really like it a lot. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to go and run for a full-time position, because it was just a natural transition for me. So the judges would actually call me up when they're going on vacation or out sick or doing a CLE, and I would actually come in to pro tem on different cases: arraignment, criminal, DUI, sentencing, name change. And I was so incredibly good at it all the judges actually used me in district court. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would go into one courtroom in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I would go into the second courtroom. And so it was just, I mean, it was honestly, it's just a natural
Yeah.
transition for me. It was just ease.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And it's great when it feels that way too, because you kind of feel like I'm in the right place.
Yeah, that's what I thought to myself. I said, you know what? I can do this.
Yeah, that's
Easy peasy.
so great. That's awesome. What are some things that you think voters should know about you and sort of what sets you apart and why people should vote for you?
Yeah. What sets me apart is really, I have a different, fresh perspective that
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring to the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a judiciary, and in
Mm-hmm.
Snohomish County, there's 17 judges, and if we don't have diversity in thought, how can we move forward as a judiciary?
Mm-hmm.
If you have the same people in there with the same thought process, how can we grow as a judiciary? And so what I'm really going to bring to the Snohomish County Superior Court is not only a new, fresh perspective, but really opening up the courtroom to allow the community to come in to see what the judges actually do. Additionally, my goal and desire is to actually go out to the community, educate the community, to
Mm-hmm.
let them know what the judge's role is and how we can continue to serve you, Snohomish County. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
what I want the Snohomish County voters to really think about when they get their ballot and vote
Mm-hmm.
Mary Anderson for judge, the people's voice, because everyone deserves a good judge that's balanced, experience, fair, and for its people. And that's me.
That's awesome. That is so, so wonderful. One question, follow-up question I have now is that uh when you say diversity of thought, my thought was there should be some sense of similarity due to not being biased, right? So, what is like a how does that look? Like, do what is the thought process that judges? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, judges all kind of have a similar thought process. They see the law, they see the facts, but really everyone kind of sees it differently in a way. So that total when you mentioned that, it just kind of my brain went, wait a second, aren't they supposed to be similar? So can you help me understand kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah. So we as judges, we all have the same sentencing guidelines and the different case law that comes to us, but not everyone thinks the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You could have one case set of facts that says X, Y, and Z, and two different judges could rule two different ways depending on how they perceive those facts. Because as a judge,
Mm-hmm.
there's this thing called discretion.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have discretion on a lot of these different matters.
I
And
see.
so that's what I'm talking about when we want to bring a diversity of thought when it comes to the judiciary. And when you have the same thought process, then
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to educate other judges around you? Because remember, when you see what you only see, you can't see it all.
Right.
So if I only have this way of thinking, then I'm not going to be able to see the other side of the coin. But that's
Mm-hmm.
why I made that conscious decision to actually reach out to both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to actually understand the different thought processes that they have,
Right.
because it will make me a better judge.
Yes, I'm so glad you said perception too, because um that I feel like for me since COVID has been something where we've gotten so focused on sending emails and sending text messages, and we're maybe communicating less in these like face-to-face ways that we can read nonverbals and things like that we I think are quicker to form an opinion on some things than maybe we were prior to, because we changed our sort of our social skills. And so as you mentioned that, yeah, it is as you learn something or as you hear something, you're already formulating in your mind how you're understanding it. And so, yeah, those differing of opinions and thought patterns and views and experiences in life is such a big deal. I'm so glad that I followed that up, because I love that response that you gave. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think it speaks a lot also to your platform and how you've been campaigning and sharing with people, what sets you apart. So I
Thank
love
you. I
that.
mean, this is truly who I am. I'm completely all about transparency. So if anyone
Mhm.
wants to actually contact me, have a conversation just like you did, I'm completely open, because I want to bring, honestly, transparency. I don't want people to be afraid of the judges. I don't want to go back
Mhm.
into the chambers and say, hey, unreachable. No,
Mhm.
this is your courtroom. I am reachable because I serve you.
That's awesome. And I love hearing that, because I think most people would be afraid to call a judge, or it feels like this sort of like, I don't know, you're a little bit farther away, right? You're have the robe and all of these, your honor, all these things that can be really scary, right? For someone who might be in front of you. But it's a really nice thing to hear that invitation for the community.
Absolutely. And that's another example of diversity of thought.
Yes, that is true, because not everybody is accessible.
That's right.
Oh, I love that. Well, great. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we know?
Only that, please go to my website at electmaryanderson.com, and or go to my Facebook, Elect Mary Anderson for Judge, to learn more about me. And I just ask simply for your vote to be your next Snohomish County Superior Court Judge, the people's voice.
Thank you so much, Mary. So
Thank
great
you.
to chat with you more, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it.